Well, hi everyone. Thank you, Sim, for introducing me, and thank you for an invitation to be here. Today I'm going to be presenting research that we have done within the Master in City and Technology, and within the research that we are currently developing on inclusive urban design. Here today I'm going to be presenting the computer-aided gender-inclusive design, and this was a research that was done together with my colleagues Matilde, Onorata, and Jacopo. So to start with, I think I'm also going to be repeating a little bit of what you said in the beginning, but anyways, I don't think we can escape this. On the context that we are currently living in, it's a context of accentuated vulnerability. And today we live in a world that is marked by this extreme accentuated sense of vulnerability. And it's mainly divided in these three axes, which is the planetary urbanization, which means that urbanization is not a regional problem anymore, but rather planetary, because over 55% of our world at this moment is already urbanized, with projections of 68% by the end of 2050. And cities, they expand very rapidly without effective planning, and this increases also amplifies the problems that we already have, which are the poor infrastructure, lack of affordable housing, overstretched public services. And also we have the socio-economic disparities, which of course is related to the problems that we currently have on where wealth is currently held within a very small amount of society, which that means that of course we are going to be having more and more sorry. Which is gonna, of course means that the economic divide leads to an unequal access to education, to healthcare, to housing, and exacerbates already the vulnerabilities that we are already living in. Also, the digital world that we are currently living also plays the crucial role on dividing people that have access to the digitalized world and people that currently doesn't have access. And of course, the climate crisis, that I don't need to go very much into it, but anyways, it also compounds these vulnerabilities, which the growth of the city, so the contributions to climate changes increase with increased emissions, deforestation, waste production. Cities are hubs of this economic and social life, and particularly vulnerable also to the effects of the climate crisis. So it's me, sorry, that changes it. So the uncertainty surrounding these big problems forces us naturally into stagnation. No? I think we are in this moment that we are already very nervous about what do we do, unable to move forward because we don't really understand the consequence or have the tools for it. But it's essential that this inaction is not an option at this moment. So this is why new approaches of more adaptive, resilient, and inclusive cities are needed to navigate this uncertainty. So how can we meaningfully design with the specificity to local questions? And how can we integrate the perspective of others through this process? In this research, we talk about the digital technologies and the capacity to access data, and that enables us designers to approach the specificities of the urban under a dynamic, collective, multidisciplinary, multiscalar, and intersectional perspective. And we aim to do this through fostering inclusive urban futures. This is a methodology to empower the designers to also engage with the capacity to understand the human behaviors according to specific local context in the processes of the urban design, questioning the potential biases that us or the context have, providing an opportunity to design for a more inclusive public spaces, more inclusive urban spaces, according to specific user needs, addressing the latent bias. And in this, I'm going to try to go fast through the case studies. I don't know if I'm going to be possible also to finish in the 50 minutes, but I'll try to maybe skip a little bit of the slides. We have analyzed different case studies. I brought 2 case studies that we did. I'm going to try to be a little bit fast with them, but just one of them, it's called Invisible Barriers, Visible Caregivers. Another one is the Gender and Power. The first case is related to the movement of individuals in a space and their connection to specific collectives as they are supporting networks. But we had a lot of course, challenges to face to get the data. Also, when we are analyzing contexts that are not necessarily with open data or easy data to get, how can we actually do that? So the challenges on the first one was the impossibility to access either because of social or physical contingencies, the data, the lack of high quality local and open data. And the tools that we found to leverage, to overcome this is that we rely on the access through a person on the ground to then give a qualitative reading to the remote sense data that we could get access to. Then we would work from an individual perspective for initial data collection to then shape back to the collective, data collection and work back towards the individual needs. This project focused on La Loma, which is an informal settlement on the slopes of Medellin, Colombia. Looking inside the gender lens through interviews that were facilitated by this insider, that is a teacher at a university, no, at a primary school. We learned that women in Loma primarily handle child care, so they are primarily the caregivers. This finding was also corroborated by the municipality's mobility surveys that indicates that 78% of people in charge of the care-related mobility are women, and more than 88% of these female caregivers, they move by foot. Oops. Thank you. The research focuses on caregivers, giving the context that I just said, and we created a profile that is called Manuela. The Manuela looks over her neighbors' children, which here we put two possible children, and given the context of this specific community, they rely a lot on the community help. So Manuela has a device that is the stroller, and we look at how does she move? So normally, what is called the pendular movement, and what is normally how people actually think people move is home to work, work to home. But as a caregiver, there is an additional stops that is considered the polygonal movement. From home, she takes them to the school, she goes to work, she runs errands, she comes back to the school to pick them up and go back home. In this case, we can see that the bias is generated by the assumption that all the travels are from point A to point B, and how this is mostly at this research not the case. It's very also important, again, to have the perspective that we had that was on the ground to understand the mobility patterns. So by specializing and overlaying the layers that were the invisible barriers that we call here, which were, in this case, the high slope and uneven pavement, the lack of differentiation between pedestrian and vehicular roads, the feeling of unsafety, and lack of resting space. When mapping these barriers together with considering that Manuela is traveling with children and a stroller, the available routes that Manuela can comfortably traverse are reduced to 26% compared to those that are non-caregivers. So here's to better understand Manuela's commute, because we're seeing the map on 2D. We focus on the most concurrent path estimation. From above, it looks like straightforward, but and it takes about 10 minutes according to Google Maps. When we see this as a 3D and we put the stroller, so if we can give a play to the video, we can see that it takes her, ideally, it takes 10 minutes to do this path, but taking into account that first she picks her friend, baby, and afterwards she picks another one with the stroller. Her journey is slowed down by 17 minutes. And it's also, she also encounters other type of barriers, which are the lack of sidewalks, as you can see in the images, some lack of sidewalk section entirely dedicated to car flows and whatsoever. So here, what I aim to show is that besides visualizing the barriers, we also were trying to visualize opportunities. So here we were like, okay, so what are the type of public spaces that we have there? On the type of data that we see when it's coming from the open street maps, and when you're looking from above, there is a lack of public spaces. But when looking at the human scale, again, using the Google Street View, but this could also mean having someone looking at the context, we can see that there are other informal uses that not necessarily are considered what we think is a public space, but they could also be opportunities. Through the same methodology of looking at the space from the human eye, we identify other type of available spaces that could be eventually reimagined. So we were thinking here of the slopes, the spaces outside buildings, the interstitial spaces, and the semi-built spaces. Those places are also, at some point, generally already looked and used by the community for how do you say? Encounters. And to develop the information that we had already shared, we intended to learn from the self-made community that hold more power and more knowledge about the topic. So here what we proposed was, it's called Nana del Bairro, which is a WhatsApp chat box. This is also very important to mention that it's contextualized. In Colombia, the WhatsApp, it's used a lot. WhatsApp is already a platform that is used, for example, by banks, healthcare providers, stores. So this is also the inspiration behind Nana del Bairro. There were 4 proposals of conversations for Nana, and it starts with the first one. Nana talks directly to Manuela, which here is the caregiver. And she gives, so Nana asks Manuela about the basic details on how she travels, who she travels with. So she creates the data based on, she creates the profile of Manuela based on who she is and how she moves. On the second, Manuela, for example, encounters an unknown barrier that disrupts her journey. She sends the location, Nana puts this in her, add this in her data set, by sending the location. On the third one, we focus on what is the WhatsApp groups. It also contextualized. The WhatsApp group are widely used as, for example, schools, parents. They already have WhatsApp groups there. So it was the purpose to include the boss to also gather community insights, so Nana can register permanent on temporary incidents. And then on the fourth, we also give positive report. So, for example, someone says, I found a place here, a bench to rest. It's also included in the data. So Nana get all of this for finally the fifth proposal, that the bot has been used mainly for helping the caregivers to identify the barriers, but the chatbot is also a tool for a final step, where the objective is also to design and deploy interventions that can make the space better, first for the caregivers, first of all, because this research was for the caregivers, but also with the proposal of make it better for community. And yeah. So there is a 4-step here that is identifying the needs and spaces based on their interaction, then the socialization of the design ideas to the WhatsApp groups. The final proposal is then deployed as a tactical intervention. Here, they identifying the image that I have is voted, and then there is an evaluation after the tactical design. There is an evaluation period. If the space is success, it can be transformed into a permanent intervention. If not, then the objective is to restart. So the design is, if it's unfit, the framework is meant to work as a continuous process. The second case, I don't think I will have the time anyways, but I will just mention that for there is for the data collection, there was a lack of data, so we started to have on what we had the info in. The scale of the city, and also through an historical analysis. And we tried to scale down the data granularly to the individual. Here we worked with the individual behavior in the context, but collecting data through an observer and distant reading that is based on the use of computational process to identify elements and behaviors that we then read through the designer's eyes. I'm not going to go into, but this is an analysis, historical analysis of the markets in Lagos that they have and play a very crucial role in the public space as what is considered public space. Here we also use the computer vision and machine learning through YOLO. You only look once via open social medias because this was the way that we could get access and data from them. But unfortunately, it's not a clear data, and the density of the objects, there are still a lot of errors. So this would mean that we would be paired up with other data collection that would enable us for more dynamic and sensitive readings of the space. So the conclusions of the case studies are that although we can leverage computational processes and ML processes, we still need to find a way to confront an on-the-ground process in order to understand the intrinsic specificities of the individuals within their groups of space and collectives. This also has to do with the questions of intersectionality that cannot necessarily be quantified or recognized through numbers as they relate to a soft understanding, and mainly recognize there is a lack of data, especially in vulnerable groups, but there is also a bias in data that we know that it already tends to be, the data is already tended to be analyzed by a certain type of profile. So with computational and communities, we are enabled to critically and creative manage uncertainties through inclusive design, thanks to cutting-edge tools and approaches effectively responded to the challenges, especially of planetary urbanization, socioeconomic disparities, and climate crisis. Sorry if I had to go very fast in the end, but I know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.